Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Tuesday. I hope you're having a good day wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world. We're heading towards Wednesday night's game against Monaco in the Champions League. Mikel Arteta will be speaking a little bit later on at London Colney. Ahead of that game, his pre-match press conference. Also got open training a little bit later on today as well. By the time you're watching or listening to this, you might have already seen what's happened at open training, whether we'll have some players back, certainly some defenders back, we shall see. So we'll talk about that game a little bit later on in the show. We're going to talk about Dan Ashworth, who's been linked for possible move to Arsenal in terms of the new sporting director to replace Edu. Obviously, he's just left Manchester United very, very quickly after joining. We're going to talk about him, the links there, and got some comments and questions from you guys as well. Still some of the fallout from the draw against Fulham at the weekend. So let's get stuck into today's show, shall we? And we'll start with Dan Ashworth. As you see here, Jelly Belly's one of several people who've got in touch across my various social media platforms talking about him. So did you see the news on Dan Ashworth getting the boot from United? I thought he was solid at Newcastle, certainly solid at Brighton. Wasn't he the one to bring Isak to St James's Park? Thoughts on if Arsenal are likely to look at him to replace Edu? Like I said, I've had quite a few people getting in touch asking me about the possibility. I mean, it's an impossible one for me to answer right straight away now because it is still very early stages. I mean, he's literally only the news of him leaving Manchester United only came out at the weekend, obviously, after just 5 months in his position there. Well, that was money well spent by Man United, wasn't it? Waiting all that time, spending all that money to get him out of Newcastle, waiting all that time when he was on garden and leave, and then, giving him the boot 4 months later. Safe to say that did not work out. He's a very well-respected top operator in his role. Obviously, did very, very good things with the FA, did brilliant things at Brighton, went over to Newcastle as well, and then Man United lured him away from Newcastle. I've seen the reports doing the rounds that Arsenal are looking at him potentially. All I will say on it is very still early days. And I've said this with all the Roberto Alabi stuff. Even today I've seen on another back page new paper, the Luis Campos again, and that Man United are now looking at potentially trying to get Luis Campos because Arsenal are looking at him. So Arsenal being linked with all of these players, whether it be Ashworth, Alabe, Campos. It is just still at a very early stage, unless something's happened that I don't know about. It's just at a very early stage. So although you're hearing all these people linked, I don't think we're anywhere near Arsenal yet coming to the conclusion of this search. There's still an early stage. The Ashworth stuff's interesting because Richard Garlick's obviously Arsenal's managing director, and Richard Garlick and Dan Ashworth have got a very good relationship. They worked together at West Brom. Garlick was understudy to Ashworth at West Brom, and then when Ashworth got lured away to go to the Football Association work there, Richard Garlick stepped up and became technical director at West Brom. So the two of them know each other very, very well and have got a good relationship. Now, Richard Garlick's obviously going to be front and centre of Arsenal's search for a new sporting director now that he is the managing director at Arsenal. So as soon as the Ashworth news broke, I remember responding to some people on social media who asked me questions about it, saying, is he potentially going to come to Arsenal? I was like, well, the link is there. So I understand why this is being spoken about because of that relationship with Garlick and with Ashworth. But just because the two of them get on, have got a good relationship, doesn't necessarily mean Arsenal are just going to go out and get Dan Ashworth because he's available. My understanding of the whole situation, Arsenal are determined to get the right person, the best person they can get, and the best person who can work with Mikel Arteta. And so they're not just going to rush into an appointment just because someone like Dan Ashworth is available and he's good friends with Richard Garlick. They're going to go out and do the recruitment properly. They've got a recruitment company who are dealing with the early stages of it as well, looking at who's unavailable, sort of putting the feelers out to people. And then it's going to come in for the club to take over with Garlick, Tim Lewis, Josh Kroenke, all involved in that process. So I don't think it's going to be a very, very quick appointment. I think they're going to take their time and look to make sure they get the right people. They're going to interview a selection of people and then whittle it down and make the decision from there. So I can't see, just because Ashworth's suddenly on the market, that Arsenal are definitely going to go in for him. I just think it's quite an easy link to go with because of the Richard Garlick stuff. So it's very tough to sit here right now and say who's going to be Arsenal sporting director. I just don't know. I said very similar when we've seen stuff about Roberto Alabi being in advanced talks with Arsenal. I didn't believe that was the case. And, I don't necessarily believe that Arsenal are going to go straight out and appoint Dan Ashworth now just because he's on the market and that he's got a good relationship with Richard Garlick. They've got to make the right appointment because it's a really crucial appointment. So much of Arsenal's stability in the last couple of years has been built on that relationship Arteta and Edu had, and how they had a very good understanding of each other and how they worked and what they wanted to do and the sort of players they wanted to bring in. You don't want to get something in that destabilizes it. Look at United. They brought Ashworth in. They thought they were getting the best of the best. 5 months later, he's out because he's had a big personality clash with some of the other guys that they've brought in. You don't want that happening at Arsenal. You want to make sure you get the right appointment for such a crucial role, and they will take their time before making an appointment. So I don't think anything is close, Jelly Belly, in terms of it. But thank you very much for your question. Right, moving on. I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about Kieran Tierney. I mentioned him in yesterday's show, and I just feel the left back situation at Arsenal, with the absence of so many people, I just think it's a really interesting point. The fact that Arteta is moving Timber over to play at left back, and we saw him do it against Fulham. I said at the time I didn't want him to do it. As soon as I saw Zinchenko was injured and wasn't on part of the squad, I thought, oh no, I really hope he doesn't do this. I thought he would, and he did. But Tierney's an interesting one. Now, why is he not getting more minutes? If he's fit, and you would expect he must be fit. Yes, he hasn't played much, so he's not match fit. But the only way you're going to get match fit is if you play some minutes. If he's been on the bench for the last 4 games, he's been training for a long, long time. This is an experienced international defender you're talking about here. This is Kieran Tierney, a player who not so long ago many people thought would be the next Arsenal captain. He was that integral to the early start of the Arteta era. And I know things have moved on from then. The left-back role in this Arsenal system has changed pretty dramatically. It's not Kieran Tierney's strong point. It's much more of your classic left-back. And I know he's got injury issues and had injury issues, and that might impact Mikel Arteta's trust in him. But if he's available now, and you need a left back now, and Arsenal do clearly because all of them are injured, I don't really get why he's not being played. The only thing I can think of really is if, and this is barring that he's basically just on the bench to make up numbers because he's not deemed fit enough, and I don't believe that would be the case. He must be fit enough. If he's on the bench, he must be fit enough to be considered minutes for Arsenal. But the only thing I'm thinking is it's already been sort of made up, the decision made, and I'm sure it has, in a way that, Kieran Tierney, the likelihood is he'll be going in January. It's just a nailed on sort of loan move with a option potentially to buy. And the only thing that I'm thinking is Arsenal don't want to risk him getting another injury before January comes about, and that stops that loan move, stops him going out, and stops the possibility of him earning himself a permanent move away from Arsenal, which I think is a bit, from a business point of view, I can kind of understand, but from a football point of view, I kind of think it's a bit of a risky strategy because, he's being paid to play for Arsenal right now. He is an Arsenal player. He's an experienced left back. He's an international left back, and Arsenal need a left back. And disrupting things as much as moving Partey to right back and Timber to left back does, I'm not sure that's really worth it. Just play Kieran Tierney. I don't know if I'm being too simplistic there in my thinking of it, but it just makes an awful lot of sense to me to do that. I've just been thinking about it a lot in the last sort of since the weekend, really. So I wanted to have my say on that as well. And there's Miles Lewis-Skelly as well. I can kind of understand Lewis-Skelly not playing against Fulham more because he'd been injured. It was a surprise even for him to be in the squad at the weekend. So maybe it was just deemed he wasn't quite ready to do that. There was a really good analysis piece from Nick Wright over at Sky Sports. He's very good at those sort of pieces. I retweeted it today. I'll drop it into the description below. Looking at Arsenal's issues, sort of the defensive difficulties they've suffered this season, and how that has kind of impacted their threat going forward as well. And he did a really good piece today about against Fulham. Partey went on the overlap once. Optastat shows Partey went on the overlap once on the right-hand side and Timber went on the overlap once on the left-hand side. It's no surprise that everything was pretty congested in the central areas when your fullbacks aren't going on the overlap. And in fact, they're going into central areas, into what's already congested area. And then you're getting these fullbacks going in there. And then that makes it very easy to defend against the likes of Saka and Odegaard on the right-hand side and Martinelli or Trossard on the left-hand side, because they've got no support and no one going on the outside, which takes defenders away and frees up space for them. And that, again, just feels like it's a direct impact of playing a midfielder, central midfielder at right back, and a right back at left back. Surely you just play Timber at right back, play Tierney at left back. And I think from an attacking point of view, you see a much better looking Arsenal side. Again, maybe it's too simplistic. And who am I to argue with Mikel Arteta? He knows an awful lot more than I do when it comes to coaching and management. But it wouldn't be the worst thing to try, I would say. Will he do it against Monaco? Probably not. But we shall wait and see. Looking ahead to that Monaco game, obviously, and sort of in terms of what I was just speaking about, a lot of that is going to depend on what happens with the injuries. We might, I say we will, we might find out more at open training a little bit later on today. Again, by the time you're watching this, open training might have happened, so we might already know whether Gabriel has been there, whether Calafiori has been there, whether Zinchenko has been there. Even if they're not, doesn't necessarily. I know I say this every single time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they won't play against Monaco. It could just be Mikel Arteta looking to pull the wool over the eyes of the opposition managers a little bit. But it would be very, very nice, I have to say, that when open training does begin, if we do see Calafiori walking out and we do see Gabriel walking out or we do see Zinchenko walking out, because it just solves an awful lot of problems for Arsenal. And I just think I know all the focus at the moment is about Arsenal and their attacking output, but I do honestly think that you get a more structured defence and a more natural defence in their position. Arsenal just look a much better attacking side, as we've seen in recent weeks against West Ham and against Sporting when you've had Timber on the right. They've just looked better. Absolutely look better. So yeah, we'll wait and see on that. Fulham Balogun. Monaco are doing their stadium walk at about 6:45 tonight, and then they've got a press conference later. Because Balogun came back. I was quite interested to see Balogun play in this game. He came back from injury recently, but he didn't play for Monaco at the weekend. He wasn't even on the bench. So I don't know if he had a recurrence of that injury. So it'll be interesting to see what the update is from Monaco and who has travelled with them a little bit later on to see if Fuller and Balogun does play. So that'll be the sort of main talking point, I'm sure, team news-wise from them. But yeah, for Arsenal, the team news certainly is going to centre around the fitness of those defenders once again. Little FPL Inside Arsenal update. Edward Lee still topping the charts with the interlopers there, but his lead has been cut a little bit. Johnny Sillivant there, closing the gap, a 76-point week for him. So he's top scoring in the top 10 there, moves up to 1,023 points, just 24 points behind Edward now. So it's been a good week for Arjun Wiener. And I presume you probably had Cole Palmer as your captain. I haven't actually looked. I did have Cole Palmer as my captain. Literally saved me from one of the worst performances, I think, of my season so far. Just looking at my points wise, I got 55 points, of which Cole Palmer got 36 of them. So the other 10 players in my league, in my team combined, got me 19 points. Absolute shocker. 1 point for Welbeck, 1 point for Kuna, 2 points for Nicholas Jackson, 1 point for Smith Rowe, 1 for Madueke, 2 for Saka, 1 for Mazzarari, 2 for Timber, none for Pickford, who I had in goal, and I had Aaron Ramsdale on the bench who was injured. Absolute shocker of a week for me. But Cole Palmer's penalties against Spurs did save me a little bit from the ultimate embarrassment of a week, basically of around 20 points. But yeah, Edward Lee, well done to you, mate. Still leading the way in the table so far with 1,047 points, with Johnny and Callum making up the top three. Moving on to some of your questions and comments now before we wrap this one up. Charlie gets in touch and says, maybe I'm looking at this too simplistically, but isn't the solution to make us a more balanced attacking team to move Odegaard to number 10 and have 2 from Rice, Marino, Jorginho and Partey sitting, set up as a 4-2-3-1 instead of 4-3-3? Wouldn't that allow us to get Odegaard into more central areas where he can still connect with Saka on the right, but also be closer to Kai and help on the left-hand side? It's an interesting shout. We have seen it from time to time, as sort of just Arsenal playing as a sort of double pivot in midfield. I wouldn't be against it to sort of shake things up a little bit and try and get a little bit more out of that left-hand side, and just be a little bit more, maybe surprise teams a little bit more, because I think everyone knows how Arsenal are going to set up with this 4-3-3 system. And if you do end up going more as a 4-2-3-1, it might throw them off guard a little bit and make Arsenal a little bit more of a threat. Look, I still think, and I know the last 2 games have sort of added to this conversation about Arsenal and the lack of open play goals and all of that sort of thing. But, and it's not been good enough the last 2 games in terms of open play output and chances created. But look, since the start of last season, before the game at the weekend, Arsenal, I think, was second in open play goals in the Premier League. I think, they were. Goals from open play in 2024, and this was before the Fulham game. This is taken from Albino on Blue Sky. His stats, obviously, Albino works at Opta. Goals from open play in 2024 before the weekend: Man City 58 top, Arsenal 57 second. So it's not like this is a team that doesn't score from open play. Arsenal do score from open play. It's just been the last 2 games where we've suddenly started talking about it, because all 3 goals in those 2 games have come from corners. And I'm not overly concerned about it. It would be nice driven to create more in the last couple of games, I know, but Arsenal will score goals from open play. They will create. They score plenty of goals. I think only Brentford and Chelsea have scored more goals than them in the Premier League this season. They scored plenty of goals last season. So they're in a bit of a rut, I think, at the moment. I don't think the defence is helping. And I certainly don't think what Mikel did at the weekend helped in terms of that formation change or the system change with Partey and Timber. But yeah, it's an interesting shout, Charlie, and I wouldn't be against it, I have to say. Louis says, Arsenal, for some reason, have signed just 2 attackers in 5 years, Jesus and Trossard. When you think about it like that, it's completely unsurprising we're struggling in the forward areas. I don't know what the root of it is. It feels like Mikel and co are just so picky when it comes to signing forwards. And when they can't get their main target, they don't sign anyone. They wanted to sign Mudryk 2 years ago to replace Martinelli, and they still haven't gone for anyone of that profile since. It is an interesting one. Again, I mean, they went for Mudryk, obviously, didn't they? They didn't get Mudryk, so they got Trossard. So they did go from one to another in that situation when they failed to get Mudryk. But obviously in the summer, we know they liked Nico Williams. That wasn't possible when they didn't go and sign anyone else. They kept their powder dry. We know they tried to sign Benjamin Sesko, a striker, in the summer. They didn't get him, and they kept their powder dry and didn't go and sign whoever was number 2 on their list for whatever reason that was. You would think just because they wanted to bide their time and get the person that they absolutely want, whether that's Sesko again in the summer. We'll have to wait and see whether it's to save money to try and go all out for someone like Alexander Isak, who we know they like as well, or Victor Gyökeres. We'll have to wait and see. But it is mad when you think about the lack of signings Arsenal have made in the forward areas of late. I mean, even Kai Havertz obviously was signed as a midfielder. He's only playing as a striker because the midfield experiment didn't really work. And then they found the position for him up front and it worked, and the team benefited from it. And they started scoring loads of goals with him playing there and feeding off him. So yeah, it is mad. How many defenders do they sign? So many. And that's why that even with the injuries they've had at the moment, they can still put out such a strong defense. But up front, it is a different story. And it does feel like if it's not going to be January, which I'd still be surprised if it is, but if it's not going to be January, then this summer needs a real sort of strengthening of the attacking positions, and not just one player, but 2, possibly 3 players to come in and really shake things up in the forward department at Arsenal. Because when you look at who they're up against at the moment, certainly in the top 3, Liverpool, how much quality they have in attacking areas when players are injured, who they can bring in, how they can chop and change things. Jota's been out for ages, and they haven't felt that because they've got Nunes, Salah, Gakpo, and others as well. Just so many options up front. You look at Chelsea, the options that they've got, and it's not surprising. They've spent so much money and they've signed plenty of good attacking talent, which gives them an embarrassment of riches when you can bring players in. If it's not Madueke, it's Jota. If it's not, you've got Palmer there, you've got Jackson there, you've got Nkunku there. You've got so many different options that you can look to play. Jadon Sancho, so many options, and Arsenal just don't have that. So it does feel like they need an area, they need a window where the focus is just on, look, let's get more attacking options to make us stronger, to make the squad stronger in that area, so we can rotate, we can have different options if players are out of form. We can chop and change things a little bit. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Louis. Here's one from John. He says, I love the videos, Charles, but I think you're close to being an apologist. The fact is the squad lacks certain dimensions to it. It has for a while, and those are more responsible for the struggles and luck and the moments going against us. Great teams have to deal with poor luck, but have the talent to overcome the poor variance. Arsenal lacks a clinical finisher at number 9 and lacks depth. Kivior, Jesus, Sterling are not good enough. Martinelli has proven he's not good enough on a larger sample size now. It's not poor luck or a theme of this season. It's squad construction and should be discussed. So I don't even know what apologist means, to be honest. I'm not really sure what you mean in that. I'm not an apologist. I'll sit here and I'll say when they get things wrong. I've said it plenty. I said it after the transfer window, they left themselves a bit light. And I'm not surprised now that it's been proven that they have left themselves a little bit light. They looked like they were at least one short in terms of the attacking. And I said that at a time. I said at the weekend, Mikel's made mistakes. He made mistakes. I don't like what he's doing at fullback. I've said this. I don't really know what an apologist means. I'm not going to sit here and rant and cry and demand people get sacked and demand players never play for Arsenal again. That's just not me. It's not this channel. If you want to watch that, there's plenty of other channels that will sit there and say that. I will say when things are wrong, and I think things are wrong, and I do say that, but I also try and sort of look at a wider context as well and look at things from all angles to say why maybe this has happened, why that decision has been taken. That's just me. That's just this channel. So if I'm being close to being an apologist, I apologize. I don't really know what it means, but I'm not going to change, and I'm going to continue to try and look at things in a much more balanced way than maybe some others do. But I agree with your points there, the rest of your points there, that I do think a lot of this season is down to what they didn't or what they didn't do in the summer window. all I was saying yesterday was it still does. It's a fact. It just feels like the small margins have gone against Arsenal this season in key decisions and injuries and all that sort of stuff. And that's not an excuse. I said it yesterday. It is no way an excuse. It was just a fact and an opinion of how this has felt to me this season, watching it from afar. So that's it. But thank you very much, John, for getting in touch. Appreciate all of your comments and questions as usual. And that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. As I said, Mikel's press conference coming a little bit later on today. We've got open training as well. So plenty to talk about a little bit later on as well. Keep your eyes peeled for all the latest news on social media from London Colney. Have a great day, everyone. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.